Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Amazon European Masters. Group A is truly heating up as we're about to head into game number 4. I will be covering the last 3 games of the day. My name is Duckling, and I'm joined by musical talent and LEC guest Nymara. How you doing?
Wait, how do you know about my musical talent? That's yet to be revealed.
I've seen you over there.
Okay, fair play. But congratulations on your debut, Duckling. It's a very pleasurable experience for me to be alongside you for the last 3 games of the day, or potentially more. There are a couple of scenarios where we still have tiebreakers left on the table, but we'll see what happens with them as the day goes on. We have a lot of games to get through before we get to that point.
Yeah, and before that, let's take a look at the highlights of LDLC versus Atleta. It was a game of League of Legends. I think that is fair to say. Atleta still fighting to get that first one.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing, from LDLC is that they can play whatever style they want at this point, and they are just very, very competent at League of Legends. I particularly like the Gangplank. It's a little bit of a different look from what Ragnar has shown from the rest of this stage of the tournament. Yike continually going back to that Viego, though, is something of a mainstay from this team, and they've continued to skirmish very effectively, continue to be very coordinated as a team, and they are a very terrifying squad of players coming from the LFL, which are going to be going forwards from this group as one of probably our tournament favorites.
Yeah, LDLC, man, they're just looking good, right? Who would have thought that the LFL would have a good first seed after
also,
all?
shout out to Ica for building the book. The Majari strikes once more. It makes me a very happy Ari main. And there you go, my favorite player in the group so far.
I mean, you get your Majari's book, you get everything you've asked for so far, but this next game coming up is certainly also going to be a banger as we roll through these last few highlights. It is going to be a good one, as it is Unicorns of Love, the sexy edition, the sexiest of all players, going up against the LVP second seed, fighting for their life here. It is Bison Seed.
Yeah, and going forward from that game, LDLC are not quite safe up in that first spot. So this next game potentially opens up LDLC to drop down through tiebreakers into that second place. And but even though, after seeing that game, after seeing how they've been playing in this group, you have to feel like LDLC are feeling pretty safe at this point.
Yeah, LDLC feeling good. They're definitely praying for a Bison's win here. A Bison's win would mean that LDLC locked first place. There is no way they would be overtaken by the Unicorns either way. Unicorns fighting this game, coming up against Bison's E-Club, of course, but if they win, they not only lock themselves in top 2, but they also keep their hope of forcing a tiebreaker against LDLC at the end of the day alive.
Yeah, and sadly, of course, we have to say goodbye to Atleta at this stage in the tournament. We know that they are now out of this group. They're not going to be progressing even further, so they will be here now, sat as playing upset potential, playing towards the blue shell. And that leads to some really interesting scenarios too, where we have to sit there and say, maybe the mentality's changed a little bit, maybe even more pressure is off them, and we'll have to track them as they get through the day, of course. Neither of those teams we just saw in the Rift, there will be reprising for this game 4.
2 new teams coming into battle, and it is going to be, for what we have at the moment, the most exciting game of the day. This is a crucial game, mostly for Bison's E-Club, because a loss here means you're eliminated regardless of what happens in the last games.
Yeah, the stakes are high. We will continue talking about that. Maybe it's even a Bison stake at this point. We'll see what happens if the Unicorns really get off to a flying start. But either way, both these teams still in control of their own destiny. Just about. It's getting pretty close. They're coming down to those last couple of games. And now I think we're going to go have a look through the standings to, again, visually reinforce how close this group is and what it means for the rest of it. Currently, there is a 2-game gap between Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition and Bison's E-Club. So that means that with Bison's, if they did have a win in the next game, you'd kind of be waiting on LDLC to take down USC in the very last game of the day. Those are the 2 games we want to watch in terms of the battle for second place and, of course, the battle for first place too. We talked about the implications of those. Atleta, they don't really have as much of a horse in that race, but they very much can play for spoilers still.
Yeah, imagine Bisons, they take down Unicorns of Love here. They have their hopes high. They just need to take down Atleta and then hope that LDLC will take down Unicorns of Love. But then losing to Atleta, that game becomes very high stakes for Bison's E-Club. Throwing that game away would certainly disappoint every single LVP fan out there.
And we know that Bison's, so we were sat in the green room and we were just musing, look, Bisons are very much the architects of their own defeat in a lot of their games. They can lose a lot of games based off of kind of maybe overreaching for some things. It's also part of that volatility, which gives them such a high upper level, though. They're a very exciting, volatile team. We've yet to really see the peak of that style here, though, at the Amazon European Masters. And in this game coming up against the Unicorns Love Sexy Edition, we really hope that we're going to see a higher level affair between the two, and hope that we can get ourselves some fun team fights. We saw that in their first match, of course.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I think one thing that is fair to highlight this game is certainly the mid lane matchup as well. We have Random, who it really isn't a random anymore, but someone who can definitely play every single
he's pretty notable.
And
For sure, and he's got up against Ruby. He's
That's
got
a
against
banger.
Ruby,
That's a
who's kind of my player to watch on the side of USC, right? I mean, when I was casting their game versus LDLC in their first round robin, that was the player we were like, oh gosh, he's starting to pop off, and had this great early laning phase. Got a bit outplayed after that point, but again, we can see the real importance of these players and how their mechanics bring so much early pressure to the table.
Yeah, I think Ruby is someone who has really impressed me personally. Every time I watch this guy, I just, get that sense of rush of energy. Oh, this is so exciting. He could definitely outplay it. And sometimes you get your payoff, you get your clean outplay. And other times, he ends up kind of throwing it away. But either way, we are about to take a look at the lineup just to quickly run through them if you haven't already gotten familiar with the rosters. The one of Bison's is especially interesting to me. I think this is a roster that doesn't have many proven players. We have a lot of up-and-coming Spanish talents, and I'll take a look at which roster we get to see first. But regardless, though, it is the Unicorns of Love, sexy edition, and they certainly have some experienced players. Ibo in the top lane, having made finals twice.
Yeah, and then you looked at, if we're going to go back to Ruby very briefly, there's a lot of history on this lineup, but Ruby is a player that's been through the LCK, was on the team which became Sandbox out in Korea, and then went on to Africa, then went over to the LPL, joined Rogue Warriors, went over to the PCS, has been through so many of these top world qualifying regions, and then has ended up winding their way up towards the Prime League alongside so many other veteran players alongside that lineup.
Yeah, and taking a look at the Bison's E-Club lineup, a fan favorite coming out of the Spanish scene. They have two especially young Spanish talent, Oscura and Mervin, coming in through the LVP second division. Oscura played LVP last season on Team Queso, had a pretty okay split there, making it to the playoffs. And someone I obviously look at as a Dane is Scooby. He has been playing in the Danish scene, making it over to the Italian scene, and he has also gotten a
We
top
made it
8
not
at EU
10
Masters.
minutes before the national pride started coming back out. I'm surprised you didn't have yourself a flag in the background for this one.
I should buy that. I'll find that on internet.
No. But I'll agree with you in this case, though. Gooby is an incredible talent, a very flexible player, and though Bisons haven't really delivered on the hype which was surrounding them, at least so far in this tournament, I think Gooby and his flexibility has added that kind of, at least the excitement in the draft phase. It's just gone a little too far. They have flex picks, but the thing is, when you flex enough, sometimes you go too far and you end up getting like a massive muscle cramp and a spasm, and that's really felt like what's happened with the Bison's drafts on occasion. Now, we're just got to see now in this one, because it is again going to be such an important matchup, but they finally can bring out all this arrayed weaponry they have and all of these roles of the flexibility to try and get themselves a solid draft win over their opponents.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We're about to head into draft, and Bison's E-Club, that miracle run has to start right here. They need to take 2 games in a row, and if there's anyone that is used to doing miracle runs on the EU Master stage, it is Scooby, doing it just last spring with Vegas.
So we have to see, of course, what our priorities are. With Bisons, you're normally going to see a lot of Enchanters banned away. Probably going to see that Zeri potentially banned too. However, that's normally a red side ban, so Bisons do Unicorn's job for them. This does open up stuff like the Seraphine ban from Unicorns and just have more flexibility to take away the more nameplate champions from Bisons, the champions which they've continually succeeded with.
Yeah, the Seraphine will be banned away, as you rightly predicted. There goes the Ari. Sadly for you, Nymera, no Ari today.
It's okay, that's fine. You see, I've seen enough bad Ari players to kind of like temper my excitement for this being locked in. Ruby is one of the better ones though, so yeah, little sad to see that removed.
No, that is what happens. The Jinx also get removed. That is something that we've seen quite a lot throughout the split, pretty much regardless of what region you look at.
Yeah, so now you're looking at what are your first picks. I mean, Zaya's still on the table. That's normally a pretty good pick. But then you look at a team like Bisons, and you know that there are a lot of champions which can counter a Zaya if you pick in the Misfortune. But locking someone like a Jarvan, it's harder to do the same unless you are a bit of a back pocket Poppy player. Poppy is a very strong pick into this champion, but we haven't seen so much of it, at least in this tournament.
Lorax only played the Jarvan once throughout the entirety of the Prime League season, more comfortable on things like the Sensao and the Viego, but hey, if there is a better time to go out, why not do it at EU Masters, right? You can definitely throw that out there, regardless though. The counter comes in, that is the Sensao instead. Well, the chamber.
Okay, the thing about the Jarvan is that, and of course now we've seen no AD carries picked in the first couple of picks, and that's sometimes a little unorthodox. A lot of people, a lot of teams like to first pick, even blind pick a lot of the stronger ADCs. But when you pick something like the Jarvan, what you're saying is that if you're picking a long range AD carry, you are going to have to deal with the Jarvan diving onto your AD carry. We don't have to do that because nothing really matches Jarvan in that regard. Something like an Ornn can very much help in that kind of area of backline access. But you can kind of see that it's kind of Unicorn sat there saying, well, we don't want to pick in the Xayah and have it countered by a Jarvan immediately. If we lock that first, though, and then lock in the Xayah afterwards, it more safely rounds out what you're trying to play in terms of a front-to-back team fight with one of the primary AD carries.
So, USC now looking to pick up a support as well. A lot of things being flicked through. What is your main prediction here? Is it the Rakan or what are they thinking?
There's plenty of options still. You know, you have hovering over the Ivern, but I was wondering whether this was going to be a Nautilus, actually. Nautilus is a very reliable champion, but just saying, look, Zyrakan, early lane pressure, able to take control of that bot lane, and particularly when you have someone like Gooby who does play, again, a lot of mages, a lot of enchants in that boss. I mean, we've seen Soraka played just in their last game earlier today. Of course, that was banned in this one, but still, along those kind of lines, someone like Zyrakan with their strong early laning phase and being able to fight right the way from level 1, it's a decent answer towards a lot of the more oddball picks.
And now Gooby goes back on a regular 80 carry. The Ezreal is being locked in by him.
Yeah, so now you're not at least completely outranged. And it, when Zyra was the crit champion, you think back to, your season 8, your season 9, blah, blah, blah. Ezreal was seen as a bit of an answer towards Zyra because you do outrange them in laning phase. When it comes to lethality, when you have the Aerie, it's a little bit different because once you tag even just one feather, it's a fairly decent trade coming through at that end. But still, Ezreal has some ability to lane into the Zyra, slightly outranging with the Q versus Q in terms of the uptime you have of all your damage. So I don't mind this pick, but it's not exactly a high scaling front to back AD carry. You're losing in the front to back regard currently.
So we're waiting for the mid laners and top laners to be locked in, of course. But before that, we're looking at the second ban phase. It is the Ornn on top laner being taken away as USC put their focus on random in the mid lane. Hot man to ban out, but they're trying either way with the core.
Well, you have to, right? I mean, he's played, he, as we said, played that Ivern mid and did fairly well. Remember, actually, this was in the very last matchup between these two teams. Ruby ended up dying on the Victor versus the Ivern. There was a cheeky little Q being thrown through to take him down in that particular matchup after the end of one particularly deadly skirmish. But now you're starting to think of, I mean, USC banning out the Corki. If they want to ban out another long-range champion, I think that signals kind of what they're going towards in terms of we want to be winning in the range, make you dive into us, dive into those feathers. Bang away the Corki does one thing there. But actually what Bison's answer to that earlier in the day was saying, let's try and side lane if we're not going to try and 5v5. So banning away something like the Aurelia, kind of a callback to what Bisons were doing earlier in the day, and Unicorns stopping them from playing through that style as heavily.
Yeah, completely correct. I 100% agree. One fun thing to mention is Random has only played 2 champs, 3 games this split. One of them being the Koki that has been banned, so he goes on to the other guy. It's the Victor.
And now you have, again, we're talking about, banning out long-range champions, blah, blah, blah. Victor's still up there, It used to be the Victor Jinx for most of this split. The Ezreal's still very long range, more of the poke in terms of the elongated amount of damage uptime in team fights when Jinx just starts popping off. Now you have to look towards Ruby, though, who's played a lot of LeBlanc, played a lot of the Ahri. Those have been the real kill threat. And actually, I think, thinking about it, I'm not sure if Ruby's got any of his champions he's played at EMS is now available, at least all these things said and done. Has a chance to counterpick the Victor, though, and try and expand that champion pool a bit more.
Looks exciting regardless. I'd book it's one of his most played champions as well, with the Nara and the Syndra hovered before, now locked in.
So now you are dealing with... So Victor is normally pretty okay at taking over lanes fairly early into the game. Syndra, with the early pressure from Dark Sphere, just being like, I'm going to chunk you down, I'm going to push out the wave at the same time, so don't stand your minions, it's a bad idea. You can start pushing forward in mid lane and giving yourself an option to play around a really high damage burst between mid jungle 2v2 is quite effective. But actually, if you're looking at how you're going to play out these team fights, a lot of it is about kind of artillery, very long-range backliners in terms of the Xayah feathers, the Scatter the Weeds coming out on one side, and then, of course, everything from Victor and Ezreal. Someone like Gwen kind of nullifies that. In fact, it's Gwen Jin's out, where they just have this invulnerable sphere, and you say, you have to get in close range. The range doesn't mean as much. So we were tracking that through the draft. Bison's answer to it is saying, let's just close the distance with things which don't care about the damage.
I am very excited by watching this Gwen coming in, and overall a way more standard draft from Bison than we have seen all of European Masters, really. This is by far the most regular, I would say, at the very least.
No, and I wonder if this is a little bit of learning from Bisons. I think that they have looked more solid when they've had a bit more time to kind of think their way through the game, not play around very specific item spikes. They have a lot of time to work out what they want to do. They have some ability to win through side lanes as well. Nara versus Gwen can get a little bit flippy, but we'll see what ends up happening with jungle attention early to potentially give a side lane matchup. But the 5v5s, as you're saying, it's the most normal draft from Bisons, and I think it's the most even in the 5v5s, which means that we get to see the execution of the 5v5 really be the determining factor between these two games as the game gets later.
Bison C Club have to win now, or it is too late to make it into the Amazon European Masters top 8. Unicorns of Love, they want to get that top 2, but they also want to keep their number 1 seed hopes alive.
I do. You know, we've seen the drafts, talked a little bit about the players, a little bit about the team's tendencies, but let's talk about the team's regions too, because Bisons are coming in as LVP 2nd seed. They're sat at 1 and 3. The 3rd seed, Barca, out in play-ins. It really is Fnatic Team Kessler that has been trying to hold the standard steady for this region, while, you know, they were coming in as potentially one of our real top dogs. The LFL up there, the LVP potentially, but they've struggled to really deliver on a lot of their promises and a lot of the hype. This is the kind of game you can start turning that opinion just a little bit around it again, though, particularly against a region like the Prime League, which again is trying to prove similar regards after, you know, Eintracht Spandau and Gamer Legion also had some of their stumbling blocks too. This is actually quite an important game, I think, in terms of determining the momentum of both these regions within the Amazon European Masters.
Yeah, and especially for the Prime League as well. You've just talked about the LVP, but for the Prime League, they're 1 and 2 seed. Are not doing that hot at the moment. Eintracht Spandau 1 and 2, and so is Gamer Legion. So Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition is really the main hope they have at the moment, and that's the team that actually came in with the least expectations out of any Prime League seed.
Yeah, no, and I think you were talking to, I think it was Blackgator from the Prime League analyst crew. I saw some of what they were saying as well in terms of, you know, Unicorns are the worst team that we sent to Amazon European Masters. I think that was, I'm not sure whether that was actually in jest or not, because I look at this team now and I think, heck, they're actually pretty good.
They're good.
They're a pretty good team, you know, and Bisons now have to overcome them to try and keep their hopes alive in this group and try and make the rest of the day a little bit more interesting for themselves in terms of potential tiebreakers too.
Yeah, and Unicorns of Love, so far also the only team to take down the NLC twice, beating Bifrost twice in their play-ins group, so they've definitely shown that they can play into the big boys.
That one, lovely, just hammer that one home.
Of course, we need the regional pride.
Yeah. Also, we're seeing that group playing in the next couple of days as well. But going into what's happening in these lanes, as we're saying, you know, mid lane, it is fairly interactive. You can see how Syndra can upset Victor in a way which few champions can. Something like Ryze and like Ari can trade pretty heavily. But what I want to see now is Lurox. You have yourself a pushing bot lane for now. You have yourself a pushing mid. You're on a Jarvan. You can definitely gank. It's the first strike Jarvan. It's not about the lethal tempo, very early pressure. But I want to see where this first gank is going to come in, because I think that particularly in top lane, in terms of getting the Gnar ahead so you're not as vulnerable to Gwen split pushing, and getting Syndra ahead so that burst threat becomes so much higher is very important in this early game. That's what I'm looking for from the Unicorns.
Albertraber also on the top side doing his red. It has been pinged by Lurox. He's walking in there slowly but steadily, making his way over to the red side jungle. Albertraber, has he taken it? Yes, he has, and Lurox just is able to see the remains of the body as Albertraber now gets caught out with the flag and drag. Ibo's rotating down and priority in the mid lane. Also for Ruby, so Lurox can stay here for now.
This is exactly what happens, right? This is exactly what happens when you have pushing solo lanes. You can start invading like this. And Albertraber, I mean, this is, I like to call it, it's what gets you kicked out of a casino as a league player. You're cooldown counting. Sees that some of those skills were used onto the minions, not able to turn around for a big burst combat, even though Jin Zhao is a premier champion at doing just that. Goes in, just annoys what Albertraber's doing, and then make sure they can get out because of the support of their own solo laners.
Now Albertraber instantly runs back down towards the bot side, wants to guarantee one. Scotland has succeeded at that, but what is his next move, Nynamar? What does he do after that little fight?
Well, I mean, I think this helps in some regards, right, in terms of you can push in. You can already see that a couple of wards have been put down. Of course, those are your level 1 wards. Have to see what happens with the second ones coming up. But maybe the next option is try and cover a dive here. There are defensive teleports if it were to come in. Syndra's in position to do so.
Yeah, TP already coming in, and that means Bison C-Club are taking their tails in beneath their feet as they're stumbling away. 2 flashes forth, and that's a very happy Unicorn.
Yeah. Okay, so Bisons don't get away with a kill on the bot tower. This does buy a little bit of a reprieve for random in the mid lane, though. That means it's not going to be a teleport back to lane. It's not going to be continually getting ahead of the Victor on an individual level for the Syndra. And what did we say Lurox's kind of checklist for the early game was? Probably trying to gank these solo lanes and get them ahead because of how swingy their matchups are. Ruby is now just kind of taking a bit of a hit on that level. Maybe that favors Bisons and just kind of slow out the game and getting the Victor to the point where they're very happy in this laning phase.
And as we're about to hit that 5-minute mark, slowly but surely objectives will be spawning, but lane state so far looking pretty good for Unicorns of Love. CS lead is building up in the top side, the bot lane survived the dive, and no Flash and Obscure on Albertraber is gonna make it so much harder for Bisons to make any play around this Mountain Drake or any other objective, really.
Well, those are the two flashes which you need for your playmaking at this point. You have a team, again, we were kind of talking about this very early into the draft before the Jhin and the Gwen were both locked in terms of the range advantage. Syndra, Xayah, they have quite a lot of threat from quite a long way away. You get hit by a random stun. Actually, with the Rakan flying forward, that's quite a lot of follow-up and blah, blah, blah. So if you don't have your flashes on your big playmakers and you have to sit at that range disadvantage, you're not particularly happy playing around these 5v5s, as you're saying. Dragon setup included in that. Have to see, of course, whether that change is coming around to your potential Herald, but that's going to be a couple of minutes off just yet.
Lurok spotted out on a ward in the top side, so Albatraber knows where he is. Both junglers still focusing over towards this area of the map, and it's just small trades, and Lurok yet again going for another invade.
Returning to the scene of the chicken crime. Not actually going to be able to contest that one. But again, I do like the fact that Lurox is, again, playing around his correct resets. Bot lane had already reset. See now that actually Dreamer Ace, we're going to have to watch what he's doing on the Rakan, see if he's looking to aid any potential plays. Just heads diagonally through that bot side jungle, giving himself options to respond to players across the map, but isn't helping out on top lane so far, which means that it's a bit more of an even numbers fight for Bison should they choose to take it.
And let's see if they decide to go for this fight, as Albatraber is in around the area and the needlework has already come out. Gwen is immune, guys. You gotta get out of the turn. Ruby might get taken down, but manages to flash away just barely as Mervin throws out the emote. That's a little bit of beer.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Gwen's pretty good into the likes of your Syndra, Jhin Zhao, similar kind of logic. You go in for your burst and wait, hang on, why isn't my ult doing any damage? You stood outside of their defensive range. Either way, Ivo's going to get himself a plate for the trouble. And USC, they don't walk away with a huge advantage, but they don't end up completely flubbing the dive either. Actually, oh, hang on, I'm going to continue on this. What Random does that? That's a very Doinby thing to do. You did this quite a lot when he was on top of the world, where you'd play the Victor, you just ult the minion wave, push it in for free, very quick way to just kind of like brute force the lane shove and say, look, you're going to lose something for it. So actually, Ruby goes up towards topside, uses the ult, uses the flash, goes back and goes, hang on, this wave shouldn't be quite as pushed in as it was, loses a wave under turret mostly.
I can very much respect this from Random living up to Doinby's name. Maybe Random is trying to become unrandom after hopefully making the miracle run for the LVP. That was a bad joke, man. Oh, you shouldn't even laugh at that. I accept.
Random has become household name. He has become slightly notable. Maybe if he wins, maybe if he wins, the European Masters at some point, we can like start changing his name. I know we have like evolving skins in League of Legends. Maybe we can have evolving player names. That'll be the next step.
Becomes notable, then famous, and then world champion after all when he wins it in a couple of years' times. Regardless, though, a slow game here from Bison City Club. Normally, they would have taken some fights at this point, some good, some bad, and the gold dead even 7 minutes in.
But let's call back then, actually, to what you said in the draft, which I think summed it up pretty well. Hang on, isn't this the most normal draft we've seen from them? And this is probably the most quote-unquote normal early game we've seen from them too. I mean, you're happy to get towards your 2-item spikes, your 1-item spikes, and play around your front to back. As we said, actually, it's probably coming down to teamfight execution in terms of what skill shots are landing, how the Gwen and the Jhin Zhao are using their various temporary frontline abilities. And speaking of skill shots, that's one way to do it.
Dreamer Ace, flash grand entrance, but the damage just not quite there yet. Bison Random takes down, and Dreamer Ace picks it up actually. Lurix now in the front line as well as Skjor gets locked up. The flash is back off cooldown, so it goes out to safety. 1 kill for Unicorn's Blood.
And that is exactly what we were talking about in terms of, wonder what happens when skill shots hit. It's about the executions, trying to sit around this kind of posturing kind of phase. Unicorns find the first kill, and now Lurox is going straight on towards Gwen.
The flash, flag, and drag extend, everything is there. The honey fruit is at enough HP. Here comes Ivo to try and help him clean up the kill. Mervin jumping around with the blast cone, trying to buy time. No TP, no flashes. He has the ghost instead. Goes for the ambitious recall.
Is he actually getting out? Is he actually going to get out? There's no minion wave.
Dreamer is sure going the wrong way. They see him now, but he's out to safety. Mervin makes out. Where did he go? Where did he go, guys? He just disappeared.
Hero was thinking that Soros was in the Prime League. I guess he has managed to sneak into Amazon European Masters after all. Mervin with the very crafty escape, understanding that didn't have the mana or the cooldowns to fight back, but finds a way out with the blast plant helping out. Have a Herald still on the table, though, so as much as the feel-good moments for Bison's kind of continue with that, there was a potential that with losing a lot of your top lane, top side presence in terms of the vision and the way to push in your waves, that maybe Unicorns could have pushed in to take that themselves, and they are in fact going to start it up.
I'm just still.
Oh no, I was just doing it for rage. He's doing it for rage. My bad. I was like, oh, he's starting it. Like, where's Draven? Why's Draven walking away? Right, that's why.
Of an ambitious call. Regardless, though, Skjor has rotated himself up. I still want to say, wow, Mervin, that's the best escape I've ever seen. I want to give him yet another compliment for that. The needlework not available, as he might have been looking for something up on that top side. But Herald has been spawned on the side of Bison, as it is Albatraber. hitting it up.
So with all of the resets involved, looks like Bisons are actually going to take this moment to take that objective. So now Bison's going to have themselves an ability to make a power play. Have to see, of course, where that would go down. I think if you start giving gold over to someone like the Victor or the Gwen, as we talked about from the Unicorn side, right, in terms of, hey, early game, Lurok's probably looking to gank those solo lanes. Actually, speaking of it, Lurok's potentially looking for a steal.
Doesn't go for the 50-50, doesn't manage to make it into the pit. Albert Traper still has Flash og Skjør. Flash is also completely locked up. Dreamer Ace and the CC's there, but such a good Crescent Guard buys so much space. And now Ruby gets taken down. It's such a good Chaos Storm. As you say, Lurok's getting chased down into his own jungle. It's a horror play for Unicorns of Love 6th edition. The needlework misses and Lurok's gets out, but they lose one.
And again, it's the Syndra into Xin Zhao. You pop the ult, but it goes straight into the Crescent Guard. The burst doesn't come through. So even though the Herald's gone down, you commit to a bit of a half-assed fight, and then with that half-hearted affair, Unicorns walk away losing themselves a kill, and Bisons get to reset and potentially use that Herald beyond it. Of course, we're going to go have a look at a replay to see how this came down. Lurex did kicked his head around the corner to see if there was a steal opportunity. Absolutely wasn't at this point, but you're now sat here with Dreamer Ace trying to potentially, maybe, I don't know whether he thought he had to bail out his two other members there because there was a collapse coming down. There wasn't a flash on Ruby, of course, meant that they couldn't escape. Either way, they ended up kind of turning around looking for this quick burst. Doesn't work out, they get punished for it. Question is now, can Bisons find themselves similar results without the Crescent Guard available? Because actually, with that being said, you see the approaching Unicorns and chooses not to go towards that dragon and peel off it.
But I think it's so interesting the fact that they've actually drafted the Syndra, because that's the second play we've now seen it now, Mara. Ruby, he ults a target, they use that vulnerability, the Crescent Guard, the Hello missed, and they just stay safe. The burst doesn't come through, and it just makes Syndra feel so useless.
No, and that's the reality of Syndra into some of these champions. Now, this is partly why I was thinking, hang on, what's going to happen with early ganks? Maybe this can get a bit tilted. One kill in that mid lane can very much start making things more Syndra favored. She's a very snowbally champion. You get up towards high amounts of damage, and suddenly your Scatter the Weeks don't just become a little bit of poke and a little bit of threat. They become like full-on kill threat after that point, particularly when you have follow-up from the likes of the Jarvan and the Rakan, everyone else that's very long range, right? But as it stands currently, Ruby doesn't have that gold. They're actually half a level down on random at this point, and the Syndra is going to start losing value from this point. Unicorns are going to have to start figuring out how to make use of their mid laner beyond this point and try and get them into situations where they can thrive a bit more easily.
And with this game being a bit slower, more tempo-oriented, I do want to point out that Gubi, with his ultimate, just stopped both Dream Ace and Reptile's recall to give a little bit of a tempo advantage, or at least get inside their head.
No, that's important. That can actually be very important. I mean, we talked about some resets kind of leading towards that, the initial Herald start, and we'll have to see whether that applies a little bit more. In fact, you can see that Dream Race is making his way in towards this mid lane. With that being said, now Gooby is the one that's starting to unlock himself from the map after pushing in bot lane.
Yeah, and Reptile will lose a couple of minions thanks to that good true shot barrage. As mentioned earlier, Dream Ace might be looking for another engage. Flashes up. He did it 5 minutes ago. Will he take another opportunity here? Needs to be careful though, as Skjør is in the area. As he goes in, the solar flare available. Scatter the Weak barely doesn't connect.
And he doesn't. And again, you can kind of see why the Syndra is kind of in this composition. Those Scatter the Weeks, particularly with the follow-up available, can become very, very deadly, but not really finding the value it wants to right now.
Oh, Skjør flash stun his blade, CC's there, but the damage is coming in as well. This wind becomes lightning, and it's Ruby who goes to the graveyard. Dream Ace now has to run with everything he's got, and he manages to get out. The Herald gets summoned as well.
And last time we checked in with this mid lane, it was actually Dreamer Ace and Ruby catching out the Victor. And speaking of that, some more damage traded back and forth. This time, though, it's Ruby stepping too far and uses his flash just the wrong frame of that animation the Zenith play. Just ends up taxiing the Leona even further forward. Can't get away from that damage. Now, Ruby with a second death. Starting to really worry, if you weren't worried before, about what this Syndra is going to be doing in this game with the gold they have available to them.
Ibo could just go for the flash. No, it misses. And the Hello missed Gwen and Immune as the BM comes through. Ibo, I feel for you, man. I feel for you. It's okay. We all make this.
Commits the flash. I mean, it's still going to be moving out of that lane and losing some of that pressure on the tower. Ibo are now going to walk up and maybe even take that one for themselves. First tower of the game still up and available. Going to go back to this mid lane replay though. And again, you can see Ruby understands the importance of trying to play around this phase. Again, the posturing phase, right? We kind of stood across the side of the rift each other trying to land these long range skill shots, but caught out by that Leona flash. We talked about that as something that was very important earlier in the game when it was blown from that ill-fated, not quite tower dive. And now have to see what can happen in the next set of fights. The Unicorns actually getting themselves control of the river for the first time in quite a while, but of course there's no dragon up, so they can't really utilize it for anything.
We're about to hit that 15-minute mark, Namara. Such a slow game up until this point, but Unicorns of Love through sheer CSing and mostly up in the top lane as Ibo has also taken the first turret. Managed to build themselves up a goal lead of 1.5k. I know you don't like talking about its importance, but how is the game state if we don't look at the gold?
Okay, all right. Okay, so to clarify, I think that gold can be quite misleading. I think there are times when it feels good to talk about gold when it's like 10,000. That's a lot of gold. Then there are other times when you're kind of like, you're using it to kind of mask a conversation about wider power spikes in these compositions. Now, we are reaching first items. Having the extra gold on Unicorns, as we said, when they have quite some flippy lane matchups, particularly the gold on the Gnar in the isolated matchup, that's what I find quite important. Has actually gone towards the Hull Breaker. It's an item which has been nerfed quite a lot over this split because it was so prevalent for quite a while, so they nerfed it for ranged matchups. So now you can see that Gwen, who is partly there for split push pressure, isn't going to find nearly as much advantage on that now, and maybe now Unicorns can look to hold their own in a more defensive position in a 4v4, while the one person of the Gnar actually pushes across the map after building up this item.
The trip is around the area. Hypo has to respect it and does so nicely. Running away for now. Lurix is also on the top side, so if it's an extended play, there will definitely be some assistance, but nothing really happens as the game still continues at this slow, methodical pace. And I understand this from both teams. Unicorns of Love, if they win this, they lock themselves into playoffs, remember. And Bisons, they need to win if they want to keep that playoff
Yeah,
alive.
so you said you can understand why it's quite a slow-paced game. Now, this is something which I like to refer to as kind of like the culinary aspect of League of Legends. Now, as a color caster, I love high-level gameplay. I love the gourmet League of Legends, which is your rotational, low-mistake styles, which are very cerebral. But sometimes you do just want a burger, which is like 2 kills a minute. Absolutely just to the walls with all of the expert violence you've got on screen. This is more towards the gourmet, maybe leaving in some of that craziness for later into the game. But as you can see, again, it's very much about posturing. It's very much about trying to use the range and not get caught out. Actually, most of these kills and the big moments have been about catches rather than big decisive engages.
That's exactly the thing, right? We rarely see any of these teams contesting for a different objective. If they show up, the other teams back off, and no one shows up to Unicorns of Love taking this hashtag Drake. So that's the second Drake as the Soul will finally take over the Rift as everyone suddenly becomes a bit quick.
They do. So that might end up impacting some of the wider map state in terms of, Ibo has gone towards a larger split pushing build, gone for the Triforce, that's more obvious, but the Hull Breaker, of course, means you want to be sat alone in those side lanes. If Bisons are now quicker to rotate towards that lane, maybe it nullifies the impact just maybe an extra couple of percent points, which we'll have to track as it goes through. Not often something which is quite visible to the spectator, but when someone turns up a couple of seconds earlier, you think, hang on, this is a little bit awkward, as we see that now pushing in and taking down another tower.
Namara, maybe the Cloud Soul will speed up the tempo of the game.
Maybe, we will hope, because we have been sat here for quite a while, looking at champions move and reset again, and wait for the next really big play. We have 4 minutes till the next dragon. There's no herald. We are sat in for a bit of a long haul here.
Look, there's something I want to bring up though that we haven't really touched upon today.
Hit me with it.
It is something about Bison C Club, but not exactly their players. This is obviously a brand new organization that has just been created, but something I found out that was really interesting to me is the fact that Bison's E Club at the finals in Sevilla was out cheering Fnatic Queso. So Fnatic is obviously this big worldwide known organization having the favorites and the stacked academy team. But Bison C Club, the brand new team with 5 players who doesn't have nearly as big names, were out cheering them in the arena. That is insane.
And the thing is that there are a couple of teams like across history which has kind of had similar kind of vibes, I suppose. No, we're not going to see a pick, so we can actually keep talking. I mean, you think about maybe someone like the Rocks Tigers coming from like season 5, where it was kind of like a bit of a band of misfits. They didn't have an organization to play under, but they kind of captured a couple of hearts and minds of the fans around it. And yeah, Bisons have kind of done that with interesting drafts, with that kind of volatility which they play with. And, they've had so many cool community memes around them too. Not all of them translate fantastically well into English, but there is a meme about the Bison's bus, the Bison's van. Gibby is going to keep on avoid the drive-by from Ruby, speaking of vehicular manslaughter. And it has just been... We have gotten to the point where there are more towers killed than champions. That is the kind of game that we're signing for. Again, congratulations on the debut. We wanted to give you the most exciting games possible, Duckling, and I hope you're enjoying it.
Oh wow, I'm absolutely loving all the action I'm getting cheered at in these 20 minutes. a few ganks and a couple of drakes. I can yell at the drakes as well, you know. We could take it that far. Regardless, though, that's enough for Bisons in this minute. I want to talk about Dreamer Ace because
Go for it.
I find this guy so interesting. Look, he's played in the Prime League since 2020, and I believe he's gotten 4th place almost every single playoffs. He has at least been so close to making it, and now he might actually make it into the knockout stages. Ibo looks for the damage. Albatraber with that crescent guard is so safe as Dreamer Ace finally comes in, but doesn't manage to lock him up as Albatraber is out. No one dies, Namera.
No one's allowed to die. We have a completely like pacifist game of League of Legends. Now, I remember a couple of seasons ago, people were having a lot of fun with 0 damage Tryndamere only hitting turrets. I thought we were done with that era of League of Legends. I thought we could say goodbye to it, but we've got it here today. And reminder, just to quickly kind of put it back up, put the scores on the doors again. I mean, this is a high stakes match. Maybe that plays into the mentality of, ooh, we don't want to lose this game, so let's not make mistakes. Yeah, but you still have to make plays at some points.
Look, they're waiting till 5 items. They're waiting for the late game team fight. They want to flip it all at an Elder, right? Why wouldn't you flip your chances of qualifying for top 2 to an Elder Drake or Baron, perhaps, as well? I have a feeling, Namera, this game, they might be slow for now, and the Lord's Champagne might have turned into wine by now, and, you know, give it to the late game. Some action will happen. Maybe here in the mid lane, a Scooby could get locked down.
Flash.
Do they have the damage? Will they get him? No. Yes, they will actually, rather. The flash doesn't get used as finally a kill comes on the board.
There we go. I think when you see the quickness pop there by Dreamer Ace, you sat there thinking, okay, I would just be losing Flash for nothing. That is the AD carry going down, though. Gooby, first kill in quite a while. And this is going to open up a Baron start from the Unicorns, and Bisons are absolutely not in position to respond to this.
We might have cast a curse the pace of the game here, Namara, because the Baron is down to half HP. Albatraber could look to get him with the wind becomes lightning. Doesn't have a flash regardless. 4k
But watch
HP.
Random. You can see how much damage Random is doing. If they allow the Victor to damage them with all the shred, look how much that could do.
Rivet is on the flank, but now he's being flanked by 5 members of Unicorns of Love 6th edition. Will have to jump between the turrets, and is getting out to safety. The Baron, though, has been stopped.
Hazan, you know, the Gwen was on a great flank angle, and you can see how much damage Victor was doing with just even the lasers across the wall with the flash and a Chaos Storm. Could have been made for quite an ugly sight. And means that Unicorns, even with the single pick, the first one that we've seen in quite a while, can't really find any big advantages off of it. What this does mean is now Unicorns have taken a lot of damage. Before they can go towards this dragon, they've given up control of the river. Bisons get to stop the dragon stacking if they so wish, and they are starting the objective.
Hyper is snaring out though, so they do have something if they want to go for an engage other than Lurux. With the Cataclysm, could go for Dreamer Ace though. Doesn't quite have his combo up yet, so Reptile just clearing the mid lane. Good True Shot Barrage as well, Reptile down to half.
And this is, again, we kind of talked about like the range of how these teams want to play with each other, but if you're trying to engage into this team of Bisons, you have the Jarvan who's fairly tanky, but you really want the Mega Gnar alongside them, and Rakan tends to be quite squishy on those kinds of engages. You can see Unicorns really leery at trying to pick up that kind of engage, but now that's a good start.
Yeah, the Bison Buzz tries to flash forward, but it doesn't quite work out. They go towards Lurux, and they almost snip him down with the needlework, but he goes golden for a few seconds, still goes down. Ibo about to gnar out, though. Be aware that Gooby gets locked down, CC'd up against the wall. Is the damage there? Yes, it is not. It is Mervin who gets blown up instead. There was no Hello Mist, there was no safety, and there was no immunity. Dreamer Ace goes back and CC's up Albatraber. Reptile, a few more autos would do it. Ibo battling Random on the other end of Skir as well. Everyone from Bisons are so low as they're falling to pieces. They lose 2 in the fight. Maybe
okay,
3,
it takes a
maybe even
while.
4. It
takes a while, but we finally have ourselves a big cataclysmic fight. And you know what? The person who I really want to shout out from that one is Ruby for breaking Leona's ankles. The flash into the Zenith Blade, completely stuffed by the Scout of the Week. But even with this all said and done, it's not a Baron start, it's not a Dragon, and we're kind of left in a 0 objective game state, and you can see what happens right there. Start of the fight, Ruby just absolutely stumps the engage that Bisons were looking for, trying to catch them against that wall behind that red buff. And after that point, you look at the damage carries from Unicorns, and they're fairly unthreatened, whereas on the other side, with the Gnar going in and all the rest of it, Bison's not able to stand and fire and have as much consistent damage across the board.
We discussed it earlier, the Hello Mist, the Crescent Guard making it hard for Ruby to burst, but this time around, so patient.
Okay, that doesn't apply to Leona. Leona's going and goes, my engage has failed.
He used the Unleash power on just when the Hello Mist ran out on Mervin, and that's the adaptation we like to see, the 1-for-1 trade there. Very close fight. It was super close to going over to the side of Bisons, but not quite, as now there's still only 2k gold behind. The Baron has been taken, so it's not a disaster, it's not game over for the LVP representatives.
No, it's not. And it means that both teams are starting to get up towards higher amounts of items, checking in on them. Of course, Gooby on the Ezreal going toward, I mean, as Ezreal tends to do, very low amount of mythic items in their full build. Sometimes you get to the point where, I say mythic items, yeah. You have your mythic item very late as Ezreal. Speaking of Ezreal, firing that ult across the board, and Lurok's very low HP means that Unicorns, they're trying to sneak it away. They know that the Baron could very much break this game, but they're not finding easy ways towards it.
Yeah, Bisons just take a mid lane turret instead and lose absolutely nothing. Now they might go for the fight as Ibo has already narrowed out Mervin. Goes into the hell open mist, doesn't find anything else. Dreamer Ace, I'm not sure what you're doing, man. You're
he's behind enemy lines.
Behind enemy lines, but I'm not sure that's the place you want to be. The Croc's helping out for now. Scooby dashes forward with the Arcane Shift. Mystic Shot connects. Dreamer Ace, if you get out of this one, man, I'll be very surprised to see what he does. He's very fast, actually.
Nod's
The great entrance
coming
over the wall. Dreamer Ace makes it out. That's a dream play here from the support.
Saving Private Dreamer behind enemy lines, but Ibo comes in with a clutch save, comes up and allows that battle dance out to safety, and neither team is finding easy wins. Neither of them are finding any way to really exploit openings on the map, and I kind of get it right. Both teams are hard to dive into, and you don't really want to flub your engage and give over a huge crushing victory, but the longer you stall out this game doesn't necessarily mean you're further to victory. High damage, high items on both teams. Both teams just feeling quite I'm not going to say like cautious, because this is beyond cautious. This is the point where it feels like they're lacking that decisive instinct, and I wonder if it's the stakes of the game. I wonder if it's the stakes of the occasion. Of course, this means so much to both of these teams.
You talked about it earlier. It is two major ERLs that are normally seen as some of the top 3, top 4 ERLs, so getting your teams out is pretty important, especially for Bisons here. They've already lost Barca Esports, LVP, lost one representative in the plains. That is not a good look for what is perceived to be the second strongest ERL.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? You were saying, like, these teams tend to be, these regions rather, tend to consider themselves in the top 3, 4 ERLs. I mean, LVP, by some people's metrics, were meant to be the strongest ERL coming into these European Masters. I think that's maybe more of an uncommon view, but I think, but they were strong, right? I mean, they're definitely up there in that top 2. Dreamer is looking for potential flank, but either way, LVP has struggled to really make that land this time, and Prime League in a similar kind of spot had some expectations, and they have struggled a little bit. Ibo watching forward, had that Mega Narc, of course, no flash to deal out a load of CC. As it stands, though, Unicorns have taken over the bot side of the map as that Dragon is spawning. They've had no trouble getting towards Dragons. It's the Barons which have punished them a little more. Mega Narc used, of course, remember, that's a low cooldown. It looks like a bit of a whiff, but you try and use that anyway, because it's up every time you're Mega Narc at this point in the game. It looks a bit meh, but it's a little better than it looks.
It's like, why wouldn't you try at the very least? As we do see the 4th Drake spawning in this game, it is the 3rd one, the soul point for Unicorns of Love 6th edition. They pick it up, no competition, as Bisons are focusing on the top side.
So, look, we've seen a lot of the same for this amount of the game right now. Now we need to start thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen in the next 10-15 minutes? Because you have soul point now on the table, which means that Bisons may be at the point where they're going to get forced around the map by Unicorns. Unicorns might be at the point where they can force Bisons to get towards that dragon and not give up that soul while the Baron is still up. Try and play that tightrope dance between the 2 big objectives on the map. So we're going to have to see how they look to play around that. Actually, Random saw the number of members walking up towards the top side and decides to teleport out to safety should there have been a collapse. But it feels like Unicorns, by getting onto Soul Point, they have unlocked the extra mode of play for them to get towards. But either way, one bad fight can still very much determine this game in Bison's favor.
And there's one thing that I really find super interesting about the build pack here. Scooby hasn't gone for a mythic item yet, and I'm wondering when that will come into full effect. And I'm asking you,
there are some Ezreal builds which just have, like, I mean, at this point, I mean, Eclipse, Prowler's Claw, actually pretty good on Ezreal. You can also go for something like a, actually in this kind of game, I wouldn't suggest going for something like a Crown of the Shadowed Queen, but some Ezreals have gone for that before, just because it stops you getting 100% burst out, right? So, say you get caught by someone like a Syndra, that can very much help in that regard. I would expect it to be one of the lethality mythics, so that's what we've tended to see from Ezreals in recent patches. And when you get to that point, because you've already built 3 legendary items before, you instantly get, like, snap, 3 boatloads of that mythic item passive, and that can very much give you a strong point in power after that's completed, but still a little way off of that, not really close to that 4 item mark just yet.
And as we are reaching the mark, though, for teamfights to become the normality in a League of Legends game, I want to know, Namera, how does Bisons execute this fight correctly? Because they lost it last time, but barely.
Well, you have Leona ult. That very much helps. It's not like you have any stasis on Ruby. There are ways to catch out that champion. Zaya's a little bit harder, right? So you're looking at particularly how much value are you getting out of that Hallowed Mist and the Crescent Guard, those two big damage denial abilities from the sides of Bison's front line. Of course, Leona kind of the third part of the front line, but doesn't have that same kind of degree of safety. So that's what I'm really looking for. That's one way. The other way is Unicorns dive too far into you, and there's a gravity field, and there's a Victor, and there's an Ezreal putting in damage over the top. I think that if Bisons are on the aggressive foot, it gets a little harder. You need to rely on your top two members in terms of the jungle and top laner to really do a lot of it. If they're diving into you, however, your options get a little bit more free to work with. So Unicorns probably want to avoid that.
The Unicorn style throughout most of the spring split has also been this slow and controlled. We're waiting for your mistake, we're good at recognizing it, and then we punish it. They are rarely the team to be the proactive ones, but we've seen it done just like in the last game against the LDLC, and now they're being proactive by starting off this
You say that as well, but I mean, even back in the play-in stage, Unicorns versus Bifrost from the NLC had very similar game in their second game versus them. It went late game, and Unicorns just said, you know what? We're happy to play around the neutrals, and we're just not going to make mistakes. We're going to sit at this point, we're just going to sit here, and we're going to wait for you to make the critical error. To say that the Lurks has actually been caught out on the side. Not really do anything. Okay, Bison's going.
Yeah, Sjur goes in towards Reptile, but he simply can't find him. The Featherstorm was enough to keep him safe. The Blade Caller not quite available to take down Sjur, so he walks out for now. Ibo down to half as he looked for an engaged Gooby. There's a lot of damage and a lot of poke with these Mystic Shots.
So that's going to be an ult raked across the bow of the team of Unicorns, but you can see Leona very, very difficult trying to engage. You can kind of see now why both of these teams have maybe been a little bit, again, as you said, overly cautious of trying to look for the engage, because actually the engagers themselves, the Rakan, Leona, in terms of the support role, not really the easiest champions to survive on your way out. Oscar does get away with it just in that one instance, but at least he gets the flash and the ultimate away from Reptile. Still got that cleanse to go through, though. So many defensive tools on that Xayah, and that's one of the reasons why Xayah has been so strong to work with as a priority AD carry in the current meta.
Yeah, Random's recall gets stopped by Lurks. Luckily for Lurks, though, he doesn't commit any further. I'm pretty sure he would have won that against Random. We're looking towards the sword as well now, Nymara. 45 seconds, so start on the Baron. They will be dancing around in a few minutes, or a few seconds actually.
So, of course, this is when we were saying that the Unicorns have themselves an extra option to play around, maybe give up that Dragon because they're on Soul Point. It means more for Bisons to deny it. And Unicorns could maybe get themselves an angle towards that Baron, but either way, Unicorns don't really have access to either objective right now. With the Dragon spawning so soon, it does look that maybe they're going to miss the train on this particular opportunity.
Bison's fighting for this mid lane priority up against Unicorns of Love, sexy edition. So much pressure is on this game. It is do or die.
Okay, now
for
look at
Bison
Ibo.
Club.
Ibo actually has a long flank and there's zero vision there. You can see the blast plant's been used. Ibo has Mega, has Flash, has an angle.
He's building the Gnar, and here he comes. He finds
There he
Random, but he
goes.
goes stolen. Gooby though, dishes damage back in return, but in the front line, Albatraber is deleted, and so is the rest of Bison's Eagle. They're losing their members left, right, and center, but it's not quite done yet. Ruby down to half HP. Gooby throwing out so much damage with the Mystic Shots as they look to secure themselves the Drake as Bison's turn it around.
But even with Ibo, with the flank, with the unseen flank comes in. But remember what we were saying, Unicorns, they don't necessarily want to be flying in towards Bisons as Dream Race gets a heck out of dodge of that. Ezreal ultimate, but Bisons, they have more options when the Unicorns engage into them. There was a grab field, there was the Victor, there was the Gwen. They do end up turning around. What should have been the miracle flank turns into more of a charge of the Light Brigade for the Bisons.
Random with that godlike stopwatch as well. Let's take a look at the replay, Namara. Just be aware of Random and his so good reaction time.
And at this point, you know, they know who's coming through, and that is an absurdly valuable piece of stasis. And even though you have a little bit of follow-up, got the aggressive ultimate coming in from Xayah. I mean, again, at this point, the front line is active. I mean, Xin Zhao doesn't get the ability to pop the Crescent Guard before they end up getting CC'd 100-0 at the end of it, but enough of the team of Bisons end up reacting to that initial engage to turn it around, and that's where the team comp has started to really shine now.
And Mervin as well. I just realized that needlework did so much damage.
No, I mean, as much as you can talk about Victor as a champion, that's really hard to dive into. Grab Field, Chaos Storm, being able to Zhonya's. I mean, when you got the Hallowed Mist and you start firing that middle work through, you're absolutely right. The Gwen is a key part of that anti-dive component in the composition.
The game still within 3k reach of Bisons as they now look for Dreamer Ace. He's CC'd up, but is able to battle down so way to safety. This game, Nymara, so close. to the biggest ERLs we have.
It is. Of course, remember, I'm going to say this a number of times this game. I've said it a number of times before, but this game is very important in terms of tiebreaker potentially for first. Unicorns would have to go undefeated on the day as long as they beat LDLC in the last game of the day after the other games that have been involved. There's a chance that they can knock them off that first place perch, either by tiebreaker or by other means, if LDLC were to lose another game elsewhere along the line, whereas Bisons, they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting to keep themselves in the competition. They're currently 2 games shy of what Unicorns have themselves, 3-1 versus 1-3, see that at the top of the screen, but they also lose the head-to-head. This is a must-win game for them.
It is, as you say, and I'll mention it. I quickly breathed over it in Champions League, but if there's anyone who knows how to make miracle runs happen, it is Scooby. We're back on Makers, an Italian team, second seed, made it out of planes, made it into groups, and then they let the miracle run happen, as they made it as one of the only Italian teams to ever make it out of groups into the top 8 of spring 2021.
Yeah, well, it's a different region for now. See if we can do the same for the LVP reps of the Bisons, and now Unicorns once again going back to that dreaded barrier and seeing if they can finally take that one down. But Bisons don't have vision. Looks like they're actually content to let it go. Again, we said that they're happy when people are diving into them. They're making a late approach. They see it going down.
The Baron down to 6k HP. Alpha Tripper could go in for a steal. Ivo gets CC'd up, and the damage from Gooby is so big. The Baron gets taken over to Lurk. The 50-50 was there, but it was not something that Bisons could win. Mervin now looks toward Reptile, and the damage is certainly there with the needlework. Mervin though gets CC'd up against the Cataclysm as they dive onto Reptile, but he can't be killed. He's a dinosaur, and he's dishing out the damage with every single mite. A double kill for him. Lurk's still alive, and it is the Bison bus that is crashing off course. There is no miracles. There are only unicorns in this miraculous world as they look to make their way into the top 8. Mervin gets chased down as unicorns look to end it right here.
Oh, you said they were dinosaurs, but they really do move in herds. They do get themselves towards that barrier, and they finally get themselves a grouped up team fight where Bisons aren't playing towards their comps' strengths. They don't get the ability to peel back, and it gets close, rounded with another clutch Sonias. But I don't think it's going to be enough. I think Bisons might have to say goodbye to this tournament.
The TPs are there. Ivo could go back and TP in as well, but he's about to gnaw out. Give him a few seconds and he will certainly do it. Mervin though has to clutch it. The rookie of the split of the LVP has to stay strong, but he can't do it. He's in the Hello Mist, but only for brief seconds. The second seed of the LVP stunned by the third seed of the Prime League as they make their way to the top 8 of the Amazon European Masters.
It's about as slow of a burn we've seen from a game in this tournament so far, but it's still one which Unicorns end up closing out. It took a couple of flubs, like we said. There was that one fight around that particular dragon where they found themselves a flank, but it was still playing into the composition of Bisons or what they wanted to do. But no, sadly there now for the LVP fans, they have to watch Bisons depart at this stage. And as much as they had so many interesting drafts and had so many interesting approaches the way they wanted to play the game, it just wasn't quite clinical enough. And Unicorns, by making so few mistakes, of course, there's still a couple of them scattered around, but it wasn't enough for them to lose this game.
Yeah, commiserations to Bison E-Club, the second seed of the LVP. They made such a good miracle run in the playoffs to even make it to this point of the Amazon European Masters, but it simply wasn't enough. They tried to play the traditional way of League of Legends, and although it was better, it simply wasn't there. It's a disappointing end for them, and Nightmare, the Prime League, they've got that 30th through.
They have done, and now not only that, because they have only dropped that one game, have the Unicorns to LDLC from the LFL. If they were to win that last game of the day and both of those teams go undefeated for the rest of the day, we could have ourselves a tiebreaker for that first place. We could finally have ourselves, an extra game on the billing of what we've kind of put down for today. And that would be a very interesting happening, particularly given how dominant LDLC have been throughout this group stage. Be unlikely, but it would be very dramatic.
But before we get into will there be a tiebreaker, for first scenario, we will have an exciting game between Atlanta and Bison C-Club. Both teams have nothing to play for. I'm expecting action. I'm expecting a bloodbath, and you definitely don't want to miss it out. We'll toss it to a break, but we'll be right back with that dang game.